Okay. The day is finally here. You guys all ask me who my integrative doctor is. I get a lot of questions on social media and just when I'm out and about and speaking at different hospitals, how I got into the integrative world. And you're finally going to meet her. I'm so excited to interview her today. She is the founder of integrativecanceranswers.com, the author of the best-selling book 32 Ways to Outsmart Cancer, How to Create a Body in Which Cancer Cannot Thrive. She is a leading edge authority on integrative cancer care, immune enhancement, optimal nutrition, and wellness medicine. She's my integrative doctor from LA, Dr. Nalini Chilkov. Thank you so much for being with us today.
So glad to do this with you, Sherry.
Yes. Awesome. So we get so many questions from patients. We're going to go through a list and of our most popular questions that we get and have you just describe a little bit, and then we're going to offer them some tools at the end of how they can have access to the same information that I have access to because of you. So thank you so much for everything you've done for me. I think the first thing that we wanted to start with is you just telling us a little bit about yourself, how you got into integrative medicine, and how you started the Outsmart Cancer program.
Well, a lot of stories are very personal, and both of my parents were diagnosed with cancer in their 50s. And so that got me interested in cancer, but it made me realize that probably my whole family had genetic risk. And so then I got more interested.
Yeah.
And so the end of my story is that neither one of my parents died of cancer. They died at 88 and 90 years old.
Wow.
And although that they got cancer in their 50s, they actually didn't die of that. And so people need to hear that story too.
Yeah.
But that's where the personal doorway came in. But I already had a practice in integrative medicine. And then when you get a little bit of knowledge in a very high need area, you get more and more people coming to you. And then I had to take a deeper dive. And now most of my practice is devoted to integrative cancer care. And what that really means in my clinic is what's the health side of the equation? So you have your disease experts, you have your oncology team, but do you have a health team? Do you have somebody that's going to actually teach you how to stay healthy while you go through your treatment and stay healthy afterwards and reduce your risk of recurrence? And so that everybody needs the health expert and the disease expert on their team. And there just aren't a lot of resources for that. What should I eat? What supplements can I take? What should I do while I'm going through treatment to stay healthy? All of those things really are important.
Yeah, well, you just kind of already answered my next question because that was going to be my follow up is, can you explain to viewers what integrative medicine is and how to integrate it into their conventional medicine plan? Because I think a huge misconception, I know for me when I speak, is that people want to do integrative medicine or they want to do some holistic things in place of conventional medicine. And you and I have had those conversations about how important it is to have both of them and have a medical team that believes in both and integrate them together. So can you kind of explain that a little bit?
Yes, and I want to also just bring up an objection that oncologists have, which I think is their faulty thinking. A lot of times oncologists will say, "Well, that doesn't work," but we're not even saying we want to replace oncology care with integrative care.
Right.
I don't have equivalents for surgery and chemotherapy and radiotherapy and PARP inhibitors. I don't have a match for that. So that's not what we're trying to do. So we also need to say that to our oncologists is not going to replace what you're doing. You're the expert in that. I want you to do that, but I want to stay healthy while I go through my treatment and I want to have a health plan for myself because patients want health as their outcome. Oncologists don't even talk about health. So what I say to oncologists is, look, you're the disease expert. Do your thing. You're the best. But I'm doing the health part, and that part you don't do. And so then there's this ability to then form a partnership without feeling like we're stepping on the toes of the oncologist.
I love that. And, just through my personal experience with ovarian cancer, that it took me a while to get to that place with my oncologist to where we let him believe and told him, like, you're the expert when it comes to chemotherapy and surgery and what we need to do to keep me alive. But these are all the great things that we can do in combination with that to prevent recurrence and for me to still have a good quality of life. And I think that it's so important to show those oncologists that and see their change. My own oncologist here in Charlotte has had a huge change of heart about integrative medicine. And now we have a new
Yeah.
integrative medicine program there, so it's been incredible.
Yes, yes. So let's just expand that a little bit because what I call my system the outsmart cancer system.
Hmm.
And what that really means is how are you going to create a body where cancer cannot thrive,
Yes.
right? How are you going to actually change your physiology to make it inhospitable to
Yes.
cancer, the development of cancer, the progression of cancer, or even metastasis? Or if you've already been through cancer, how are you going to change your physiology so that you aren't hospitable to a recurrence? And
Yes.
so that's really what we're talking about here.
Well, that's awesome because you just led me into my next question, which was to talk about the cancer terrain and the tumor
Yes,
microenvironment and
yes,
how,
yes,
can you explain to patients what that is and how we prevent
yes.
a body from, coming into the place where we are causing cancer to thrive?
So my metaphor is thinking about the soil in a garden. And if
Mhm.
you have poor soil that doesn't have all the nutrients plants need, you don't get healthy plants and you get a lot of weeds. And so we want to change the soil. We want to change our fundamental background physiology
Mhm.
because that whole cancer terrain, the soil of our physiology, is actually a signaling environment. And it's either going to send growth signals or stop signals to cancer cells. And so there are a lot of factors in the soil, in that cancer terrain, that tumor microenvironment, that will create this environment that inhibits cancer cells from having a happy place to live, essentially. And there are a lot of things that oncologists don't address and don't think about, even though they're aware of it. It's not in their model to address it. So we look at things like inflammation, controlling blood sugar and insulin, controlling your detoxification capacity, your vitamin D, your copper, your zinc. We look at all of these things that will inhibit tumor cells from being able to grow. And ovarian cancer patients, after successful treatment, will have microscopic amounts of ovarian cancer cells left.
Mhm.
And if we can create a way to keep it always microscopic, then you'll just never have a macroscopic tumor again. And so that's really our goal, is to really contain those microscopic cells that are left after you've had successful oncology treatment.
Yes, I love that. And that kind of leads me into my next question too about cancer and inflammation and how you feel about the link between the two. And also, if you can touch a little bit on everybody talking about how sugar feeds cancer and how that plays a
Okay.
role in inflammation as well.
Okay. So, cancer itself is an inflammatory syndrome. So, tumor cells themselves make a lot of inflammation around the tumor itself. But having inflammation in your body in general also gives a soil that is a happy place for cancer cells. And having chronic inflammation also then starts to damage cells and damage their DNA. And then they're vulnerable to turning into cancer cells. So, controlling inflammation is a key part of health in general. Most chronic illnesses have inflammation as a factor.
Yeah.
So the most powerful thing to do and the simplest thing to do is eat an anti-inflammatory diet. Anybody can do that.
Yes.
And so what that really means is eat more plants, eat less animal-based products,
Mhm.
eat products that are whole natural foods, organic, no pesticides, no additives, no artificial flavorings and colorings, no artificial sweeteners, no hormones, so that your food is clean.
Mhm.
And if you eat mostly plants, you decrease the amount of animal fats and proteins in your diet. You don't have to be vegan or vegetarian, but most of your plate needs to be plants and lots of colors. Eat the rainbow.
Mhm.
And then add more healthy fats and oils to your diet than you normally would. So think about olive oil, or having nuts and seeds in your diet, eating avocados, having some hummus that's made with tahini and sesame oil. More foods that have plant based kinds of fats and oils make your diet more anti inflammatory.
Yeah.
And so that's the simplest way to tip your inflammation.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, that's great. Obviously, I do all of that. I do get a lot of people that ask me about eating an anti-inflammatory diet and what I eat every day. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that at the end because we're going to share some of your recipes, which is amazing. And I love getting your newsletter because you always have good recipes in there. And I think a
Yes,
lot of people
yes.
struggle, just they don't know where to start. They don't know what to eat next.
Right,
So,
right. But let
um,
me answer your sugar question because I didn't
yeah,
answer.
I was just
Okay, all
getting to
right,
that.
all
The
right.
sugar,
So,
insulin, yeah, all of that.
yeah, so there's a misconception. It's kind of oversimplified that sugar feeds cancer. What's true is that cancer cells have a different metabolism than normal cells. And cancer cells use sugar as their fuel,
Hmm.
but in order for that sugar fuel to be available to the cancer cell, insulin, the hormone insulin gets triggered every time you eat a sweet, every time you eat a starch, every time you eat a grain, anything that takes sweet on your tongue, that's the family of carbohydrates.
Hmm.
Every time you eat anything in that family of foods, the hormone insulin is triggered to get the sugar inside the cell. And so it's actually the insulin that's the growth factor.
Yeah.
Insulin is the growth factor. So eating a diet that does not trigger insulin is the overarching principle. And that's just basically a low carb, low sweet diet.
And is that why the ketogenic diet has been in the news so much and is so popular now that a lot of cancer patients are trying it?
Well, there's a lot of confusion about ketogenic diets also. So, what a ketogenic diet is a diet that's extremely low in carbohydrates
Hmm.
and very high in fats. So, a ketogenic diet is actually not a healthy diet. It's a therapeutic diet.
Yeah.
And it has its place and it should be done under supervision because you can really get into trouble if you try to do a ketogenic diet on your own. There's a lot of pitfalls and you can
Hmm.
actually make yourself worse. I've had one patient ended up in the emergency room because
Oh my
she
gosh.
unbalanced her electrolytes and got dehydrated by the way she was doing it.
Mm.
Other people eat too many animal fats and proteins and their cholesterol goes up. So you really need a nutritionist who knows how to guide you
Yeah.
through a ketogenic diet if you're going to do it. And ketogenic diets are great right before chemo. So you can either fast or do ketogenic diets right around chemo and then eat a low carb diet the rest of the time. And I call that the outsmart cancer diet.
Yeah.
And so that's a safe, healthy diet that's just super low in carbs and higher in fats and oils. But the principle of that, and why there's so much buzz around ketogenic diets, is because it
Hmm.
drops your insulin.
Hmm.
And so when the ketogenic diet in its extreme form keeps your blood sugar and your insulin so low that your body starts to use ketones instead of sugar for fuel. And healthy normal cells can use ketones, but cancer cells cannot use ketones. So the ketogenic diet actually starves the tumor cells of the fuel that they need, which is sugar and insulin.
Hmm.
And so you can accomplish that in a less extreme way
Sure.
by eating a low carb, low glycemic diet
Hmm.
that is safer most days of the week. And then you could do a ketogenic diet like 2 days of the week or do fasting 2 days of the week. You could do something like that.
Yeah, and I do like intermittent fasting. I know you and I have
Right.
talked about that where like I eat on like a 16-8 type of schedule. So I fast for 16 hours and then I eat in an 8 hour window. And I
Yes,
think that's a little
yes,
more feasible for somebody that has a normal life,
yes,
that's
yes.
traveling and yeah. So,
So, intermittent fasting, there's actually a really fantastic book written for the general public called The Longevity Diet. And it's written by a Dr. Walter Longo, who happens to be here in Los Angeles, where
hmm.
I live. He's an expert in gerontology, the science of nutrient needs for older people, but also he's an expert in nutrition and cancer. And he really proved the research on intermittent fasting and cancer. And so, what he learned was that if there's a big enough window in every 24-hour cycle where you have no calories,
Hmm.
so you have a window where you eat and a
Yeah.
window where you fast.
Hmm.
And that's the intermittent fasting
Hmm.
idea. And his study showed that you have to have a minimum of 13 hours between tonight's dinner and tomorrow's breakfast.
Yep.
And so, or some people like just wait to eat till lunch if they eat late dinners. Most people can do 13 hours. That's not hard to do.
Right.
The ideal is to do what you're doing, to eat for 8 and fast for 16.
Hmm.
But almost anybody can do a lifestyle that has that 13-hour window between dinner and breakfast. And so that puts a switch in your physiology that does a number of things. Number one, it drops your insulin and your blood sugar during that time.
Yeah.
So it starves out the cancer cells of their fuel, but it also turns on an immune switch and it dramatically upregulates your immune system. So it's a really simple thing to do,
Yeah.
and it has a huge impact. So when I talk to people in this context, like, what are the big levers? What are the things you get the most mileage out of? We've just talked about two: eat an anti inflammatory diet, drop your insulin and your blood sugar by changing the amount of carbs in your diet, lower the
Hmm.
carbs, and do intermittent fasting. Anybody can do those things.
And by the way, they're two things that don't cost any money. Because
That's right.
a
That's
lot of
right.
people talk
That's
about
right.
financially, I can't do integrative medicine. I'm like,
Right.
yes, you
Right.
can.
Yes. Right.
There are
That's
many
right.
ways to do it. So
That's
the
right.
other thing that I get asked a lot about and I want to talk about is living with cancer as a chronic illness, because
Yeah.
you and I have talked
Yeah.
about this. Like,
Yes.
yes, you're probably gonna fight ovarian cancer for the rest of
Yeah.
your life,
Yeah.
but you can
Yeah.
still live a really good life.
Yes.
So what does
Yes.
it mean to
Yes.
be living with cancer as a chronic illness?
So there's a large population of people who live with cancer as a chronic illness. And what we really mean by that is, and this is actually more common than people realize,
Hmm.
is that and let's just talk about ovarian cancer because that's this
Yes.
community. Ovarian cancer is a chronic illness.
Yes.
And if you frame it that way, you'll never feel failed if you get a recurrence,
Right.
You'll
Absolutely.
understand
I love that.
that's the nature of the beast, and
Yep.
it's that kind of a cancer. And so what we want to do is have health as
Yes.
a cancer patient, right? We
Yeah.
just go back to this. How do we have health? But also, it means that you may be undergoing treatments for long periods of time.
Hmm.
So you want to have a plan to manage the side effects of your treatments
Yes.
so that they're really minimized. And I think that you've had the experience that you can be on treatment and feel pretty well most of
Yeah.
it,
And
right?
live a pretty normal life. I mean,
That's
yeah.
right. That's right.
I meet people all the time that are like, but you don't look like you have
Right.
cancer or you had
Right.
cancer. I'm like, well,
Right.
not all cancer patients are bald and
That's right.
skinny. Some of us
That's
have
right.
what we call chronic illness that we live with
That's right.
forever, but we're
That's right.
still living a very good life with this
That's
disease.
right. That's right. So what I say to patients when that's kind of a new idea is I say, diabetes is a chronic illness.
Yep.
High blood pressure is a chronic illness.
Hmm.
These are things we manage, right? We're not trying to eradicate them. We're trying to manage them so that if you have diabetes, you're a healthy diabetic. If you have high blood pressure, you're a healthy person with high blood pressure. And so it's the same thing. And then I think it kind of shifts this to say, all right, what's the plan to manage this?
Yep.
Instead of the sort of kind of cowboy approach of we're going to blast it and try and get rid of the whole thing. We know that that doesn't really work with ovarian cancer.
Right.
So the goal is always to reduce your tumor burden to microscopic.
Hmm.
And then oncologists don't really talk to patients about the fact that there's still some microscopic cells there. And so then the patient doesn't realize they need to do something about that.
Exactly.
And my whole point, and you've had this experience, is you could take control of that reality
Yep.
because all your doctor is going to do is wait
Yep.
and
They're gonna send
monitor
you
you.
home. Yep.
And then you can feel empowered and change the trajectory of your journey
Yeah.
by implementing these principles that change the cancer terrain. And then you just slow down that whole process, and either those microscopic cells never do anything, or if they do something, it's small, and we catch it when it's a blip on the screen instead of a big forest fire.
Like mine, I mean, I did have a recurrence a year and 3 months afterwards, but it was very small and
Mhm,
contained,
mhm,
and my doctor was
mhm,
shocked. He said, I only have
mhm.
5 patients out of thousands that have had localized recurrences where we could go
That's
in, do
right.
surgery, get it out,
That's right.
do six
That's
months of
right.
chemotherapy, and go on with your life, which is
That's right.
amazing. And it was,
Yes, it is.
for me, it was justification or maybe validation that what I was doing was the right thing, which was your protocol and following what you had told me to do.
Well, let me tell you a couple of ovarian cancer patient stories because I want to give people an image to think about for themselves, right?
Yes. I
right?
love that.
So you can go through the really tough treatment that ovarian cancer treatment is. And then when you're done with that, if you had successful treatment, then you need a plan so
Mhm.
that you're going to rebuild from going through that really challenging kind of treatment, surgery and chemotherapy, and and then recover from that, and then have a really long window of time whether you have a recurrence or you don't, right?
Yeah.
And if the recurrence you have is small. So one patient who had ovarian cancer, stage three. Most people, as we know, are stage 3 or 4 when they're diagnosed. And she went through conventional treatment with my support. And then we were watching her CA125 tumor marker, and it was low, but it was creeping up, right? It was still low, but it was creeping up. So something was going on.
Mhm.
And so her oncologist wanted to do another round of chemo, and she absolutely didn't want to do it. And so I asked her oncologist, can we just do a strong integrative therapy with acupuncture, herbs, diet, and nutrients and see if we can drop that tumor marker? So that's what we did. And her tumor marker went, I think it was around 15, which is not abnormal, but it kept creeping up every
Yeah.
month. And it dropped down to 5, and it never, ever went above that. That was over 10 years ago.
Wow.
So
That's
she was
amazing.
having a micro
Yeah.
recurrence, and we put a lid on it. Right now, she's very strict with her diet, and she's very compliant with the herbs and supplements long
Mhm.
term, as you are.
Yeah.
And that's how you take control. I have another patient who was actually diagnosed at stage 4, and she'd watched her mom die of ovarian cancer
Mhm.
also. And she had very aggressive disease, and she came to me when she was just starting her chemo and she was not tolerating it well, and she felt miserable. So the first thing we did was we helped her to be able to tolerate the chemo, improved her nutrition, she stopped losing weight, and she stopped feeling lousy. And so she was in that first, adjuvant cycle of chemo. We're trying to reduce the
Mhm.
tumor so you can have a smaller surgery.
Mhm.
And so when she went into surgery, there was nothing to operate on.
Oh my gosh.
So
That's
we
amazing.
enhanced the effect of the chemotherapy, right?
Right.
And so she had a huge amount of tumor mass, and they went in and there wasn't anything to operate on.
That's
And
incredible.
so then she was supposed to have 2 more cycles after, and she really didn't want to do it. But I said, as an insurance policy, there might
Yeah.
be something microscopic there. So we did that. And then her doctor wanted her to go on a long-term therapy with Avastin, which is a new
Yeah.
approach to trying to not have a recurrence.
Mhm.
But I'm not a big fan of Avastin for my patients
Yeah.
because we have other options.
Mhm.
And she really didn't want to do it. And so I told her oncologist, I have things that act like Avastin
Mhm.
without all the side effects.
Mhm.
And so she's been doing that for 2 years
Wow.
without a recurrence, without her,
That's
and she had
amazing.
really aggressive disease. And when she finished her therapy, she really was feeling like she was going to have a shortened life and she was
Mhm.
going to die soon. And I said, I don't know, why don't we think about at least 20 years, right? so, and so she had to work up to that. And the longer she went without having a recurrence, so she's getting married next month. She's actually
Aw.
planning her future.
That's amazing.
Yeah,
It's gotta be
yeah.
such an amazing feeling for you too to bring people hope like that. I love that.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
awesome.
it's really important to know it's possible because then as a patient, you can visualize that for yourself.
Right.
But I think what we have to emphasize to everyone who's listening, as a patient, if you want to be an outlier and have these kinds of stories, you have to be really engaged and take full
Mhm.
responsibility for your health and
Amen.
really make changes and really take the reins and take control. And if you don't do that, my experience as a clinician, the people that do it completely, every hard thing I ask you to do,
Mhm.
you're the outliers,
Yep.
definitely. People do it halfway and they get the halfway results. So
Yeah.
you have to be all in, and ovarian cancer is sufficiently challenging. You have to be all in. You
Yeah,
know,
it is.
you
Well,
really,
and we know it's aggressive too, right? Compared to other cancers. So I think it's
it
really
is,
important to
it is,
yeah.
and so, but think about these 2 patients. What is aggressive is actually controlled in these 2 stories that
Yeah.
I told.
That's
right?
amazing.
These two stories. And
Yeah.
we should tell people about Nisha Winters also.
Yes.
She's a naturopathic doctor friend of mine who is she's a naturopath and an acupuncturist. She
Yep.
was diagnosed with stage 4 ovarian cancer
Mhm.
as a young person, and she was told she just had less than a year to live.
Yep.
And she took the reins, and I don't know, she's close to 50
Yeah.
now.
It's incredible.
Yeah,
Such a
yeah.
cool story.
And
I
but
love
what
it.
she says about her own journey though is she knows she still has ovarian cancer,
That's
right?
right. She's just
In
controlling it.
microscopic
Yes.
amounts, and that she always has to be controlling it. But her story is a great story to
It's
inspire
amazing.
people as
Yes.
well,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely. So we've talked a little bit about, like you said, when you're going through treatment and you want to manage those side effects. So what are like the top 5 nutritional supplements that you recommend to cancer patients? I mean, not necessarily specific to ovarian, but just all cancer
Yeah,
patients.
yeah. So here's how I think about it. I think about foundation nutrition, like what are the unique needs that cancer patients have and cancer survivors, and what kinds of supplements provide that foundation. And then I think about more targeted things. So I'm going to talk about it in 2 ways. So foundation supplements, you need a good multi, but you need a multi that's designed for cancer patients.
Mhm.
And so you want that multi to be copper free and iron free. And so my favorite supplement is the multi I have you on, which
Mhm.
is called Pro Thrivers Wellness Multi. And you take one twice a day. And I'll just say that we're going to give everyone in your community access to the supplements my patients get access to by giving you a link, which will be published on your website.
So awesome. Thank
So
you.
there's that multi, and it's a fantastic multi. It was actually designed by a naturopathic oncologist friend of mine who is a breast cancer survivor herself.
Great.
Then we want to have a good probiotic because having a healthy gut microbiome, a healthy gut ecology is part of
Mhm.
normal immunity and inflammation control. And so, my favorite company is Claire, Klaire, and they have a really nice broad spectrum probiotic that's called Therabiotic Complete. But
Mhm.
you also want to get probiotics by eating a fermented food in your diet.
Yep.
So you want to eat things like sauerkraut and kimchi, fermented vegetables. You can drink kombucha if it's not full of sugar. You can have a little bit of yogurt or kefir. You just need a little bit, just
Yep.
like as a condiment. And so if you eat a variety of fermented foods, then you will have some healthy bacteria in your gut every
Mhm.
single day. Then you want to do some omega-3 fatty acids. That's your omega-3 fish oils, the EPA and DHA.
Mhm.
You want to make sure you pick a brand that's not contaminated, and you want to have about 2,000 milligrams a day. So in the retail market, Nordic Naturals is a pretty good brand. And in the professional lines, which we're going to give your community access to, I really like Designs for Health has Omega Veil
Mhm.
TT, and you take one of those twice a day. And that's really high quality, not contaminated in the natural form.
Mhm.
And then we always want to think about bone minerals. If you are in a low estrogen physiology because you don't have your ovaries, then you need to take care of your bone health. But you want to look for bone minerals that don't have copper in them. Copper is a growth signal to cancer cells, so our multi's copper free and our bone minerals are copper free. And a really nice formula is made by Design for Health. It's called OsteoBen,
Mhm.
and you take two twice a day of that. And then we want to put vitamin D
Mhm.
into our protocol because vitamin D not only does it protect your bones and your brain and your blood vessels, but it has anti-tumor activity. And so do the fish oil. They're anti-inflammatory and have anti-tumor activity. The vitamin D is one of the most powerful things to control cancer. And
Yeah.
so about 2 to 5,000 units a day.
Mhm.
And you have to really have somebody check your blood levels of vitamin D to make sure you're taking the right dose. Some of my patients take higher doses. You want your blood level of vitamin D to about 75.
Which is so
So
interesting because mine was around like 43 not too long ago, and you kind of beefed mine up a little bit, and now it's at 80. which is
Yeah,
amazing.
yeah, so that's the that window is where you get cancer control
Sure.
and cancer protection,
Hmm.
and so, you really have to measure your blood because everybody utilizes vitamin D at a different rate.
Hmm.
So, vitamin D, Synergy by Designs for Health is 2,000 milligrams, and vitamin D Supreme is 5,000 milligrams, and those are super high quality. They both have a little bit of vitamin K in them, which protects your bones and has some anti-cancer activity as well. So that's nice. There are other companies that make formulas like that, but this is a really reliable company that has no contaminants, very high quality products.
Well, thank you. That was a lot of information.
Yeah,
Okay, I just have one more question for you, and then we'll let you go because I know you're probably busy and enjoying some time at home today. But what accounts for the explosion in cancer rates? I don't think we meet anyone nowadays that doesn't know somebody that has cancer. Why?
right,
Why I
right.
get asked this all the time when I speak at
Yes,
places. Everybody
yes,
wants to know,
yes.
you were so healthy, how did you get cancer? And
That's
I
right.
think there,
That's
I
right.
know how I feel, and that I think it's a combination of things. But I'd like to see what your thoughts are on it, how you feel about it.
So if somebody asks me the question, what are the top three reasons that there's so much cancer?
Hmm.
My answer is environment, environment, environment. So we live in a toxic,
World.
chemical laden
Yeah.
environment
Yes.
that is interacting with our physiology that we're not designed to live in an environment with so many chemicals.
Mm-mm.
So our food is adulterated. Our food has hormones in it. Pesticides and herbicides transform your immunity and the way your cells work normally. So, the most powerful thing to do is take as many chemicals out of your life as you can.
Mhm.
The most powerful way to do that is get rid of packaged food
Yep.
and eat whole, unprocessed, natural foods. The minute you do that, you lower your toxic burden. But then you want to go through your house, every room in your house. Are you using body care products and
Mhm.
cosmetics that have parabens and artificial scents and artificial uh, colorings in them? And are you using things in your garden that are toxic? Are the cleaning supplies you're using toxic? So you can actually quickly get a lot of toxins out of your environment. You want to make sure you're drinking clean water, right?
Mhm.
That's been filtered and doesn't have chemicals in it. So it's not too hard to do that. So I always just say, walk through every room in your house and your garden and
Yep.
ask yourself if you're using chemicals. The minute you do that, if you have children, you've just saved them chemical exposures for their
Yep.
whole life. And
Yeah.
so that's really important. When you have little bodies in your house and they're in the same environment you are, the exposure is exponentially higher because their bodies are so small. And
Sure.
so kids get much more, and so do our animals.
Yeah.
And so we just protect everyone we love by cleaning up the environment.
And
And
yeah. And I
yeah,
think it's so easy too to make like your own at home cleaning supplies. Like we use, essential oils and vinegar, like such a simple way to clean your
you
countertops.
can
And
do that. You
yeah,
can do that. Now there's plenty of companies that
that
are
are
good. And
making,
let's mention the Environmental Working Group website,
yes.
ewg.org.
Yep.
You can look up almost any product on there. And then they have a sister site called the Cosmetics Database. And
Ooh.
let's say you're looking for a sunscreen for yourself or your child, you can look on that site and find one that is safe. And they have a red to green kind of a rating system. So just look for the green products. Once you know the companies that are devoted to those kind of clean products, you know what companies to buy,
Yep, exactly.
right? So I'll just say one more thing about that. So the environment is the big contributor, but there's a perfect storm between genetics and environment that can lead to the development of cancer. And so there are clinicians like myself that you can look at your genetics also and see what makes you vulnerable. So let's say you have detoxification genes that don't work so well, and we live in this toxic environment. So you can figure out how to make your physiology more efficient. Usually that's just B vitamins. But
Mhm.
if you don't know you have that inefficiency, you don't know you're vulnerable.
Yep.
And so there are ways to find that out and then just do simple things that protect you from the genetics that you got being less prepared for this environment we all live in.
So it's so helpful. Thank you so much for
Yeah,
saying that.
yeah, yeah,
So I
yeah,
think we're gonna share some of your recipes. They can also go to your website, Integrative
yeah,
Cancer
yeah.
Answers, and they can sign up for your newsletter. And then how can our listeners learn more about your Outsmart Cancer program?
So, my free website with lots of resources for patients and family whose lives have been touched by cancer is integrativecanceranswers.com. And I know you'll put that link on.
Yep.
And if you want to get this free download, I made this little recipe book called 13 Amazing Salads. And so it's integrativekanceranswers.com/salads.
Mhm.
And I know you'll put that link up too.
Yep.
And then you'll just be in our community. You'll get our newsletter. And my website, by the way, has over 400 recipes on it. But
Wow.
also, there are downloads on there. If you were just diagnosed, if you're going through treatment, if you're
Yes.
recovering, if you want to know what to do long term, having been through all of that, there's some free downloadable PDFs on my website for everyone too that helps you understand what questions you should be asking yourself and your doctor and what kind of supplements are safe to take. And so all that's for free. And then there's my book, 32 Ways to Outsmart Cancer, which is a really simple read of all these sorts of things we just talked about
Yes.
that you can implement. And so, and the book's on Amazon. So all of those things allow anyone to just get started, right?
Yeah. Well, thank you for that because we're redoing some stuff on the sherrystrong.org site too, and we're gonna put the links up for if you've just been diagnosed or in treatment or life after cancer to your
Yeah,
website as well
yeah,
because it's been such a
yeah,
great resource for us and we
yeah,
use it all the time and we want
yeah,
other patients to go there. There's not a lot of we're just starting to see more people talk about integrative medicine, but it's so refreshing to hear you talk about it. I know you have over 30 years experience and you bring so many patients, including myself, so much hope. I was hopeless
mhm,
until I found you and talked to you.
mhm,
And then
mhm,
it
mhm.
changed my mindset so much and I looked at my disease so differently when I met
Yes,
you. Like
yes,
you were
yes,
like, Sherry,
yes,
yeah, you might fight this, 5 more times, 10 more times, we don't know, but you're gonna live a really good life. In 20
right,
years, you and I are still gonna be talking and we're still gonna be friends.
right.
And it
Yeah, it's a
changed.
great reframe, isn't it?
Yes.
It's a really
It's
great reframe because oncologists are pretty depressing, you know?
Yeah. Well, yeah, I had several not my
Yeah,
current oncologist. I love him, but I did have
right,
several other oncologists tell me I was going to die, and I actually had
right,
one tell me
right,
to go home and get my affairs in order. And I remember
right.
thinking like, you have no right to tell me that. Who
That's
are
right.
you?
That's right.
Yeah.
That's such a terrible way to talk to
It
patients.
is. And you bring so many people hope and I'm just so proud to call you my friend. So thank you so
Mhm.
much for doing
Yes,
this today and
yes,
for
yes,
everybody that follows Sherry Strong and all the people that are going to get
yes,
to listen to this.
yes.
And I hope I get to see you soon, my friend.
Yes, me too.
Thank
I'm
you
so
for your
glad we
time
did this.
today. Yeah.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Okay, my dear.
Bye.
Bye-bye.